So if you're like me and you have the Lumix S5ii and you're now looking at the Lumix S5iix thinking, I'm missing out. I want those extra features. I think they will help me out with some of my projects. I switched to Lumix from Sony at the end of 2022 to the original Lumix S5, and buying that camera is one of the best things I have done by far for my videography and filmmaking. A few weeks later, however, after buying the S5, Lumix announced the S5ii and the S5iix, which as we all know included some new great features such as phase detect autofocus instead of contrast based autofocus that was in the original S5, and you could also record in 6K. They got rid of the record limit. There was just a huge amount of upgrades that made it look like a nice upgrade from the original S5. Now I enjoyed shooting on the S5 that much that I went ahead and bought the S5ii because it seemed to be a camera that will perfectly complement the original S5 because it is an upgrade from that, but it just seemed to be the perfect camera to fit all of my needs. Now I decided to buy the S5ii instead of waiting a couple of months for the S5iix to be released, but this week it has finally been released, and now that it has been released, did I make a mistake buying S5ii? Should I have waited for the S5iix? I've not got the S5iix, but when you place it side by side to the S5ii, apart from the X being fully blacked out, they look almost identical. And I will admit, the X being fully blacked out does look absolutely amazing. But it's on the inside where you start to notice the differences between the S5ii and the X. I'm not going to go into details about the specs on the S5ii and the X because there are tons of videos out there on YouTube, but very quickly they have the same phase detect autofocus system, the same 24 megapixel sensor. They can both shoot 6K up to 30 frames a second, 4K up to 50, although there is a crop in 50, and 1080 120 frames a second, which is absolutely great, and that rivals most cameras and even cameras at a higher price point than it. The difference with the X is mainly with video features, with it being able to record internal ProRes and all-eye recording to an SD card. You can record to an external SSD through USB-C, and it also supports ProRes RAW, B-RAW over HDMI to an external recorder, such as something like the Atomos Ninja 5. All of those extra features in the X are putting that camera into some pretty serious filmmaking territory, and it's still not much more than the Lumix S5ii, and it is way cheaper than cinema line cameras like the Sony FX3, for example. I do just want to say quickly though that I'm not saying the S5ii isn't a great videography and filmmaking camera, because it absolutely is. It is super impressive and powerful, and it gives cameras way higher in price range a run for their money. Going back to the X, however, with those added extra features that it brings, that really does make the X so hard to look past, especially if you are into making short films or documentaries or doing a lot of high-end commercial work. Now, if you're just making YouTube videos like this, you're probably not going to want to shoot everything in ProRes RAW or B-RAW just because of file sizes really, but for those bigger high-end projects that might crop up every now and then, being able to have access to those features in a camera of this size is absolutely insane. So if you're like me and you have the Lumix S5ii and you're now looking at the Lumix S5iix that's just been released this week thinking, I'm missing out. I want those extra features. I think they will help me out with some of my projects. It's not all doom and gloom, because the S5ii is still an incredibly powerful little camera capable of some amazing things, and it's only going to get better because in a few weeks or a couple of months, I'm not sure exactly when it is, Lumix are going to be releasing a paid firmware update for the S5ii that will bring some of the features from the X to the S5ii, such as being able to record to an external SSD and being able to record ProRes RAW, B-RAW to an external recorder as well. That is insane, and it just makes up for the fact that this little camera hasn't got it now. So for that reason alone, if you are slightly tempted to switch from the S5ii to the S5iix, because you do feel you're missing out, I wouldn't be rushing out anytime soon to go and grab the X over this, because in a couple of months you'll be able to get some of those features on this camera, and that is incredible. And this is just the perfect camera for everything I do, and it's only going to get better as well. That being said though, the S5iix does look incredible fully blacked out, but I'm going to stick with this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Have you switched to Lumix recently? Are you using the S5 II, the X, even the original Lumix S5? That is still a great camera and I use it almost daily, as well as the S5 II. So yeah, let me know in the comments. Come and say hello, and I shall see you in the next video.